Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar where we are going to have a look at applying standards using Revit and the Autodesk BIM Interoperability tools. You can see on my screen that I've got Revit open. You'll be familiar with this interface, a typical kind of project that we might get. And inside of the project, we have all sorts of elements, walls, architectural walls, chairs, tables, and so on. So what's important to us during the project is that we need to apply coding to the elements. So I'd like to illustrate to you how that might look. In one of the spreadsheets that I can show you a grid where we have the, sorry, I'm just looking for the file quickly. I'm going to open that now. Right, so what you'll see on the screen is that we've got this grid. And this is typically what a large project might look like from the client side. So they would have a BIM representative, and they would then state that the project, the standards that are applied across the project. You can see over here the guidance collaboration, project stages and file naming, object naming, drawing, classification, the level of development, common data environment, costing, COBE, which is something I'm going to look at in a further webinar, which is used for facilities management, and is often a required, you see here the mandatory requirement that it is COBE, and then contracts, and then also quality assurance and quality checking. So there are various standards that apply across a building. Of interest to us, the Revit standards you'll find in the British Standards 11922/2007. That is typical. So how we name the project and how we do the object naming and so on. And then we've got some further standards over here, including the unit class. So there's an example of a system that is used to code elements. And you'll see here it's in guidance and also in the classification. So this element over here is specifically what we'll be looking at today. How do you use Revit to comply to some or other standard? It does not need to be unit class. It could be some different standard, and that is within the classification of the elements. This is important downstream because from a design perspective, you are going to hand over to a contractor most probably, and the contractor will use this coding not only to do costing, but also the planning of stages during the project. The platform that we use within Revit is the BIM Interoperability tools. I'm going to open this link for us, and then we can see what that takes us to on the Autodesk side. This is free. It's issued by Autodesk, and it's available to you through your account if you've got the ASC collection or the Revit license. And you can also get that from the Autodesk desktop app. And I would recommend, it's an add-in, and I recommend that you install it. There are different parts of the interoperability tools. Today we will look at the classification manager, but you've also got the model checking, which can automate checks against the model. For instance, has classification codes being applied to all elements. And then there's an enhanced DWG exporter with a COBE extension. Again, that's going to be part of a further webinar where we're going to look at how do we apply COBE to our model. And this is really what Autodesk has come up with for everybody in the world to be able to manage their standards. When you install it, it's going to sit in a BIM Operability Tools tab like this. On the left-hand side, This is what the webinar is going to be about, the classification manager. There is the model checker, the configurator for the model checker, COBie extension, and all of this is now within the BIM operability tools. Strictly speaking, one should set up the COBie for the project beforehand, because one is also able to assign some of the codes to the COBie parameters at the same time as assigning the classifications. COBie, just as an explanation to tell you what it is, there's a lot of metadata which has been formalized, which would include information of installed equipment, like who the manufacturer is, what the serial number is, what is all the information, the warranty date, how often it needs to be serviced. Those are the types of information or the kind of information that is recorded for facilities management. So once the contractor has built the building, then it will be managed through the COBie parameters. It's written out into a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet is then used for facilities management. Its origin is in the United States, but it's been adopted by the UK, and it's applied across the Middle East as well. The classification managers has less parameters. It's simply going to say, and I'll give you an example of what you might be familiar with. If you have an element and you go to the type properties under the identity data, you would find the assembly code. So this assembly code is American, comes out with Revit. And in here you can see typical sort of, it's isolated for this element, which is of course a piece of furniture, but it then recognizes that this is a piece of furniture and these are the codes that you can apply to it. But it's strictly speaking, this is American in origin because the software's origin is American. So the question now becomes, all right, I'm not American and I'm involved in a project somewhere else, or maybe even in South Africa. How do I apply the relevant codes to my building elements? So part of the BIM Interoperability tools on the website is the white paper, which Autodesk has brought out. And that looks as follows. This is a very good white paper, and it speaks to the usage of standards within Revit models. You might not have seen this before, but it's very interesting. So over here we've got the what is classification management, the different standards that there are, master format standard, which you can see as a master list. I'll give you a short explanation for organizing construction work results, requirements, products, and activities, mostly used in bidding and specifications. The master format originated in North America and was produced by the Construction Specifications Institute. So once again, speaking from going from design into construction and making the life or making it possible for your models to be ported through the design and into the construction so that the level of information can increase and enable the contractor to do his job. Then we've got the uni format. That's for arranging construction information, organized around the physical parts of a facility known as functional elements, mainly used for cost estimates. Uni format originated in North America, is produced by again by the CSI, and construction specifications of Canada. There you can see America and Canada. Then we've got unit class, again for the design and construction process, organizing library materials and structuring product literature and product information. Unit class originated in the UK and was produced by the Construction Industry Project Information Committee, the CPIC, and the National Building Specification, the NBS. And then lastly, the other one here is the Omni class for organization, sorting, and retrieval of product information for all objects in the built environment, including product lifecycle. Omni class originated in North America, produced by the CSI, and the C of Canada. So we see that it's formalized It's country, not country specific, but the countries of origin are shown over there. And this white paper is really useful. So if you want to know about standards, or if you want to learn about standards and how they are applied within Revit, this is the way to go. One gets that from the BIM Interoperability tools, and there's quite a bit of reading to do here, but it's very important that if one is involved in a project where it is mandated to use these standards, then one should be ready to use these standards. So do go and read this white paper. It's available for download from the BIM Interoperability Tools website. So not only is there software to download, but you can also download the white paper. Right. Then following our, that was just as a matter of introduction. Right. Like this. Right. So very shortly we looked at what is the BIM Interoperability tools. We're going to have a look now at the classification manager, the available built-in standards that we can choose them. We've just seen in the white paper what they are. We're going to apply codes to the actual model. You'll see that it's possible to copy the codes into a family library. And then we're going to have a look at a situation that we might encounter in South Africa, which would entail using something like the Association for South African Quantity Surveyors, the ASAQS standards, and how to set up a custom code Excel file for using such a standard, and then also some useful links. Right. The reasons why we might use this over and above the information that I've given you already now as an introduction. We've got 4D scheduling, 5D, which is costing, so quantity surveying, and ultimately facilities management. That's once we delve into COBie. Here you can see an image of what it would look like on your account. So if you go into your account, into the Revit downloads, into the add-ins, updates and add-ins, you'll find the BIM Interoperability tools for Revit, and you can download it directly from your account and install. We've looked at some of these standards. Okay, we've alluded to them from the white paper, the master format, unit format, unit class, omni class, and custom. And then also there's this white paper that you can download from the BIM Interoperability tools. Go to the resources tab, download the white paper if you want to read further about that. This is just a reiteration of what the standards are. There's 4 standards that we looked at. Now we're going to look at how do we use that within Revit. Okay. So once we've installed the BIM Interoperability tools, and we also know which standard is applicable, then we can go and have a look at setting this up. It's very simple. You can go to the setup of the classification manager, and here are the latest versions of these standards. So if I choose the unit class 2015 database, and I say finish, then what it does is create project parameters for classification dot and then the standard, and after that maybe a table within the standard, and within a table you will have a description and a number. So that would correspond to something like this, where we've got the assembly code, which is built into Revit, the American standard. That is the number, and then the description will be movable multiple seating. So that is two pieces of information that this classification manager will attach according to the standard we choose from the setup, creates those shared parameters for us, and now they are applied at that one, for example. If we modify the shared parameter, we can see that they're also applied to all of these categories, including furniture and furniture system. So as a result of that, we can expect to find this parameter not in the instance properties, but in the type properties. Scrolling down, under data, these shared parameters have now been created within the data section. So because I've loaded multiple standards in the past, I've got all of them listed here. Is it necessary to apply all of these? No. One simply applies the ones that are required under the BIM execution plan. That is the information that the client would like, and that is the information that we need to give them. And we don't want to do work over and above what is required. Applying the standard is now a very simple task. One clicks on the element that one likes to apply, the code to standard, go to the BIM Interoperability tools, click on Assign. You can see there are multiple categories over here. We've got classification options, and at the beginning I mentioned that one should really set COBie at the beginning of a project before applying standards, because some of these codes are mapped across onto the COBie information as well. If something is not applicable, it will not be available for selection. And then here we can see, according to the unit class, here are some information that's applicable to the building, clearly not to the element. Those are rooms and spaces. Those are contracts. And over here we've got the element. So this is where we want to be. We want to be under the element. In the unit class standard, the British standard, we've got some tables. EF, DR, which is product, and then SS, which is systems. All of these tables are used for different purposes. And that information and some further courses are available on the NBS website. We'll look at that a little bit later, where they give an explanation on the British standard, which you might quite possibly come across, that we've got to use one of these. So it's a very extensive table. I can show that to you over here. In my spreadsheet, I'd like to show you the DR table. There's the products table. So this is how the British classify their elements. You'll see that there is a lot of information here. It's much more extensive than the other standards. 7,030 lines worth of it, and continuously increasing. I've seen fit to download the table and put it in Excel and to search, because not all companies do this, but the family libraries. So if I look at the standards and I look at the British Standard 2007 with object naming, and I'll see that they require the British Standard for naming objects. If you delve into the British Protocol, you'll find that they require that you use it could be the SS, but mostly the PR code to predicate the family with the code for the family, and then after that with the description before stating the manufacturer and the size and the level of development of the family. So it's important to be able to name a family. So this is cumbersome. One could add a filter into a table like this and say, what should a office chair be? And then it can filter out there are office chairs. One can even look at the containing code to say that there's a smaller part there. Remove the filter from the table like that, and then add that filter into the code to see what the parent would be. Chairs, seats, and benches, and then one could look further and see, so what code would that family be? Most of us are used to relatively simplistic projects, even in Navisworks. If these families were to be flash detected, we would not be interested to know whether something is a bench, a barbell bench. We would just ask the question, does furniture clash with door opening, for arguments? However, when you get into quantification and into facilities management, there would be an installation, quality assurance, quality checking. There would be checklists and quantities and information required for these elements that would be necessary. And if one has the ability to filter out the elements per their coding, then the quantification and all of these other further or downstream activities become easier. One could use Dynamo or Navisworks. There is a way in Navisworks that you can use an XML script to read the coding and create selection sets, for argument's sake, if you want to do clash detection or score timeline or visualization. But it would be even more interesting, I think, for bean counters and for so quantity surveying and so on, to understand exactly what it is that they're picking out of the model. And that's what the British are doing, is they're applying to each and everything that they can. And they see, right, it's useful now if we split these into multiple subcategories because we can get the information out. So just note it is an extensive standard. It's more extensive than, say, some of the other standards. You might not go with the standard, but you might someday come across a project which says that you are supposed to use it. In this case, in this project, you would have been required to name the family in the first place by that code, and also that it might be used further on into QA and QC. In this case, it wasn't. The unit class was only used for classification, but it would also play a role further on for classification. So you might have multiple standards that are applying across an element for different purposes. The BIM interoperability tools help with that. I personally have found that if I want to name an element, it's easier to use the classification manager and then to search in the classification manager for the elements that I would like to apply. The reason for that is there are not over 3,000 lines that are picked out over there. There are simply a smaller amount of elements that are recognized here, and it's easier to search within Revit, and the BIM interoperability tools. It's just taking a bit of time. It's doing its work in the background there, and there we can see chairs coming up. I can just search down this list over here and say I'm interested, say, in office chairs. Here's office chairs. And then I say assign. Right, so a very long-winded explanation of what we are doing. Assign that. So now let's go and have a look at the information within this chair. There we find under the data that it has applied the correct PR number and that it is now an office chair. The next step of our process, if we were following the standard, is that we would go to our family library. And here is an example of how one might name such a file. In this case, we're looking at doors, and you can see that the discipline, the way that these families are named within the British Protocol at least, it's firstly the discipline, which in this case is empty, so anybody can use this door. It's not meant to be an architectural door only. Then it's the product code. After that, the description, who the party responsible is that created the model. And then a description that it is a model element and that it is an LOD of 200. So level of development of a family is something that you might also very often come across. It would resemble something like the following. The 2010 is quite popular. I've seen that across certain projects within South Africa, where we've got the elemental classification. So this would be the assembly code within Revit, if we are going with the uniformat system. And there we can see that it follows a timeline of the building as it will be built. So it will start with the substructure, the foundations, we'll carry on to the shell, and then ultimately the interiors and the services last of all until the project is done. So this is quite a short standard. You'll see that there are 208 lines here. Compare that to the British standard where for products at least we are dealing with over 3,000 lines. So you don't have to, if you do it for yourself or for your own company, you can start with a more condensed version like this, but you won't be able to delve in and be picky about exactly what you want to extract from the model, the information that you'd like to extract from the model to manage. And then under the conceptual design, detailed design, the construction detailing, so typical 3 phases of our models, we would see that the BIM manager is responsible for setting up the BIM execution plan will state the level of development. So when the family refers to a G2 in a name like that, then it would correspond to a level of development of, say, 200. In addition to that, the party responsible for that family is also stated, and that might be one of the companies in the project. So everybody understands that if you would like to have a wall foundation, you are not supposed to model a wall foundation or create a wall foundation unless you are the structural and an LOD of 200 under the conceptual design. Once you go into a detailed design, it might be required that you use a higher level of development. So you duplicate the family and replace the existing family with a more extensive family. But all of this, you can see how it's all interconnected. The naming of the families and the way that we manage the information is very much the same. The next question that I asked myself, and we can look at that, is, great, so do I have to do this with every project? One can't leave all of the families that one is going to work with in a template. The template is going to be impossibly big. So the short answer to that is typically yes. For each project, you would have to do this repeatedly for each and every project, because you can't just go and write the family. If I had to open this family, remember that the family is within the project. The information that I've applied to the family exists only within the project. It's not in the original chair family file. So the information is not stored in the library. It's not part of the information that the check came out with. So can I go and manage my library? Can I go and manage my library so that the codes are already in my library? And there's a danger to this, which I'd like to highlight. It's possible, but is it advisable? And the question that I have, if any of you listening have had to deal with shared parameters, you'll understand the reasoning behind this. You'll see on the left-hand side the shared parameter file. Inside that file is a global unique identifier that identifies the parameter. What that means is that I can have two parameters called classification.unitclass.ss.number in the project, each one with a different global unique identifier. You never want to end up in a situation like that, because when you schedule, you'll come up with two different parameters that you need to manage, but they are named the same. And this is something that occurs in projects in companies that do not understand how to manage their shared parameters. To get into a situation like this where you want to start managing your family library, be aware. If the publishing authority or the country that publishes that standard changes the way in which they generate the global unique identifier for the shared parameter, then you're going to be in trouble. Chances that they do that is slim to none. So I've started on my own for myself. I've started attaching the coding into the families that I often use, and then one can also run automated checks using Dynamo to see whether everything is still the same between the last coding and the new coding. So as they add new categories within their coding, have they changed any of the global unique identifiers that they are generating the standard with? So I know this is maybe on a very advanced level, but it is necessary for the manager to consider this because of time constraints, and just managing their families and their templates in a responsible manner so that they don't continuously have to either set up at the standard again and then assign the codes again. Right, so how would we do this? Let me save this file. I'm going to edit this family. I'm going to save this family. I'll save it within my webinar. And then I'm going to have a look at the parameters that I see. So over here I can see the identity data. Can I see anything under data itself? No. So I can see because it is a shared parameter, it wasn't even built in. So the way in which we manage this, we go back to the project. We go back to our project parameters, and we can export these parameters. In this case, it doesn't want to play with me at the moment, which you see. It doesn't want to export for me at this moment in time. I do apologize for that. So it seems they might have done in Revit 2021 something that one can't do. However, with Dynamo or in an earlier version, we can, different project possibly, we can export the GUID. So you can pick that information out of the family using Dynamo. For those of you that don't know Dynamo, it's part of Revit. It allows you to ask that information of the model. The result of that is the classification file that looks like this. where the parameters are listed as well as their global unique identifiers. This is now the shared parameters file for the project. And what's required for us to do is to add this information into the family. So we can, let's just create a second type as well. So here we've got different types for the family. That's a typical thing that happens. We've got many family types. And now we want to add the information under data. So we start by going to creating a new parameter. We can grab that from our shared parameter file. I've listed them under classification as the parameter group. And we're looking at the PR number and the PR description. It's a family parameter, it's a type parameter, and we're going to list that under data. Here it's created the element, and then we can also add the PR description. Also under data. Information hasn't been populated. We're going to save this file and load it into the project and close. I'm going to overwrite the existing versions. And the original family goes to 114. And the type parameters have that piece of information. I could, of course, also apply it now. It's per type, so I'd have to do it 3 times, which would waste my time. So I could edit this family again. This time it's going to include the 4th family type because it's bringing it in the project. There we can see it. And under the data category, you'll see that we've got office chairs and the PR number. These are text parameters. So if I had to copy this and paste it in as a formula, and apply, and then delete the formula, I'll find the same information propagated across the types. There we can see that by using the formula, I've now applied it across all the types. If I load this, save and load the family back into the project, then all the types will have the information applied under data. So I had to use the shared parameter. You might be lucky in the sense that I think there's just something up with this file at the moment that it won't let me export the shared parameter that we find there. We would modify it and click on export to export the parameter. We apologize for that. But I would be, personally, I would be able to get this information out of the family or out of the project just using Dynamo. That is possible. But now the coding is embedded into the family and into the family library, which means that if I have to use it on project A and project B, it will always be available to me. Just note though, that it might be an issue if the global unique identifier should ever change in the future. And that would be as a result of the British, the Americans, the Canadians, or the Australians Singapore, whoever issues that standard, South Africa, if they have to change the global unique identifier, then your family will be inconsistent with the BIM interoperability tools. Like I said, the chances are slim to none, but it is a risk that you take, but it's possible. In South Africa, we often have to do with the ASAQS standard. Vaughan Harris from the South African BIM Institute. I'm just going to forward to that. The South African BIM Institute is under new direction. Mr. Gregory Mafokeng is now head of this institution. But Vaughan Harris, who is associated with the BIM Institute of South Africa, is responsible or has been responsible in the past for releasing the ASAQS standard. And that's what you'll find here. So once you open up, how does one of these, the BIM classification manager uses an Excel file. It reads information from an Excel file. When you open up one of these files, you'll find that there are at most 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tabs that are available. In the British standard, you will find all 5 of them used. In South Africa, you might find only 1 of them used. On the instruction page is a very carefully scripted set of instructions on how to set such a file up. So if you do get hold of a standard that is unique to the country in which you operate, or that isn't included in the BIM interoperability standards, or that you can't get hold of from somebody like the South African BIM Institute, if you need to apply the ASAQS standard, then you need to follow this process. Very important here is the shared parameter that you need to use. And again, asking this of the regulatory authority is important. And then below that is listed the code. This is built into Revit of the Revit family category. So when we deal with furniture, we need to map the parameter onto that code over here. So that belongs to furniture. And in our products, we then go through the code as listed over here. There is the classification manager's shared parameter name. It has to be exactly the same as what would be within your shared parameter file. So if I wanted to apply the ASAQS standard, I would go in here. I would add a new parameter. And from my classification, I would look for the ASAQS. Here's the ASAQS. So the description and the number. Add that to data. And also the EF number. Also to data. So you'll see how the naming of this parameter is exactly the same as what is within the custom file. Those two parameters must be exactly the same. And that's part of it. That is the standard coding. So if you look at the ASAQS, this is quite an old version of it. I haven't done it since. I did this about a year and a half ago or so, years. That was version 3, though. We probably have a newer version up now. But you would map, or they would map, the coding of their system across into Revit family categories. So we should find something here like furniture somewhere. Let's just see, we'll search for that. Seating benches. And the code is mapped onto the furniture family category. Once that is done, we can now leverage the standard. Save this file. I'm going to load this into my project again. So we're coming close to the end of the webinar. I'll leave 5 minutes for questions shortly. And then on the ASAQS, on the BIM Interoperability tools under the setup, I can then browse to the ASAQS standard. Hopefully we're in luck and it's going to work. So there is an error because we still got it open. Close that file. Should be operational now. Let's try again. And if we now go and apply the standard, there we can see our furniture. So depending on how extensive our own national standard is by this time, you might find that office furniture is included. You will find in the type properties, there's now mapped under data. There is the ASAQS standard. There is the information that we are after. That's it in a nutshell. Just to finish off with some useful links. Note the BIM Interoperability tools, download and install the add-in from your Autodesk account. Not only is the built-in assembly code as we know it included, but also some of the other standards like the British standard. You can also do your own custom standard, and you can manage your family library and embed the codes into the family for use in a further project if you don't have to reapply the code. The BSI group is great for getting hold of international standards. That's the British, their standards. So we'll be able to buy from them the relevant standards if necessary. Once you get involved in the project, you'll have to get hold of the standard. And then lastly, we've got the BIM Institute and then the BSI group and then the NBS as well. The NBS is also a very good resource with standards. You are welcome also to go and have a look at the NBS. This is also where you can download the tables for the British standards like I've got them in my project. But you can also do that from the BIM Interoperability tools, but it's good for reading. If you are interested, and you can see some of the big names that we're all familiar with are all involved within this unit class system around the world. So yeah, that's really it. It's just a short crash course on how we can use the BIM Interoperability tools to apply standards specifically to our elements for use in the downstream processes. With that, I'd like to hand it over to you. If you have any questions you'd like to ask at the moment.
Paul, I want to say thanks. It's a lot of information to take in, but it's fantastic.
I'm glad, Clovis. I'm very glad that you've at least seen it. It's not that difficult to apply.
Yeah, no, yeah.
So hopefully also you can get involved in nice big projects like you've already done.
Yeah.
And the next time that you get involved in a project, even if it's overseas, then you'll be ready to say, yes, we understand how to use the BIM interoperability tools to apply the relevant standard that you are requiring of us to apply.
Exactly.
Perfect.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a great time. I know I said that you can't hear me and everybody else as well. Thank you very much for attending. Much appreciated. I hope you guys have a great weekend, a great day further.
Thanks, bye.